Greetings, everyone. My name is Sarah Barnes, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I'd like to welcome you to Building High-Impact Teams for Healthcare Systems. So before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly review some logistics for those of you who may be new to Campbell & Company webinars. To ensure that you have the best webinar experience possible, please follow these tips. Close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Call in using a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer. And then finally, if you have any visual issues, you can send a chat to Campbell & Company or you can contact GoToWebinar. And finally, our presentation today will last 60 minutes and you will earn 1 continuing education credits for your participation. That's good for certification with CFRE International. About an hour after the webinar, you will receive an email from GoToWebinars that includes a web address to download your certificate, the PDF of the presentation, as well as information on how to register for our next webinar. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please send a chat to Campbell & Company. And now I'd like to introduce Adam Wilhelm. Adam Wilhelm is a senior consultant at Campbell & Company. As a member of our healthcare practice, Adam is currently providing counsel to healthcare clients whose aggregate campaign goals total more than $500 million. Adam holds a bachelor's degree from St. Olaf College. He holds a leadership role with the Association for Lutheran Development Executives and is an active member of AFP and AHP. And Marian Alexander DeBerry is the Director of Executive Search at Campbell & Company. She has more than 30 years of professional experience, including 14 years in executive search. While she has conducted searches in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, her work is particularly focused on conducting searches for the senior leadership of mission-driven institution. Marian has a Bachelor of Psychology and Sociology from Duke University and a Master of Business Administration from the Wharton School of Business. So welcome, Marian and Adam.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I think we're going to have a really informative and productive session. To begin, I want to talk about some of the objectives for our session today. We want to begin by looking at a loose line of organizational progress or maturity as we think about healthcare organizations and their fundraising arms. We want to talk a little bit about the typical characteristics of a few different sizes of organization and also talk about staff profiles within each type of organization. We also want to discuss how to best position your organization for hiring successful fundraisers, what considerations need to be taken into account given a decreasing pool of capable fundraisers, something we've certainly all been hearing about. And once you've been able to hire those successful people, what are the keys to retaining some of those folks? How do we keep them engaged, keep them motivated to becoming continuing productive members of your organizations? We also hope to leave plenty of time at the end for questions, so please feel free as we go throughout the webinar to submit your questions. Looking at a line of organizational maturity or progress, when we think about this at Campbell & Company and the organizations that we work with, we find it's most simply broken down into 3 different areas, and certainly there are examples that are beyond, above, and within this, but to make it simple, this is one of the ways we tend to think about it. So going from young to high impact, with impact being defined by the contribution the foundation or the development arm of the organization can make within the hospital or the health system. I'll say a little more specifically about each of these, but typically for young, beginning or smaller organizations, we tend to see organizations that are focused from a fundraising perspective mostly on events and annual-based activities, direct mail, and other things of the like. Moving along the continuum, we begin to see organizations grow to be organized by function. And what we mean by that is having individuals responsible for the annual fund, for major gifts, for corporate and foundation fundraising, for operations, etc., even though all of those positions might not necessarily be filled at one time. And then where we see organizations being and having the greatest impact on their organizations is when they become major and principal gifts focused. So these are organizations that have a heavy lean towards a relationship management based way of fundraising. So we want to begin to move along the continuum here, talk a little bit about the type of organization and the characteristics that surround it, and begin to talk about some staff profiles within this. Again, for these younger organizations, in terms of a path of fundraising maturity, we tend to see these organizations having fewer than 5 staff. Often they can be single shingle organizations, if you will, having one director of development responsible for a myriad of objectives. Usually a 1 hospital or small 2 to 3 hospital system. From a fundraising perspective, typically raising less than $5 million annually with any significant fundraising initiatives falling below a $10 million goal or right around there. Some of the important metrics for this kind of organization is to look at the net from events. So often in an events-based organization, what you're actually pulling away from those events aside from the gross can be really important. The ROI that you're achieving on direct fundraising and the time spent out the door interacting with individual and major donors. This is something that can often be very overlooked in this kind of organization. Just want to move to Marion to talk a little bit about the typical staff profiles we see in this kind of organization.
Thanks, Adam. Generally, when we see organizations of this type, there is kind of a profile that emerges for us. More than likely, because this is still a smaller, younger, emerging kind of organization, you may or may not have as strong a healthcare focus for the kind of person that would join this kind of organization. And that's actually okay, because one of the other pieces about this is that the person needs to be pretty flexible in what they do. They may have joined the organization to be responsible for events, but they also may find themselves being involved in the annual appeal, or they might find themselves in doing some smaller kind of individual gifts pieces. So this person, their experience may not have emerged so much, and that may also be true even at the more senior levels of this this function. Because it's smaller, 1 to 3 people, you'll find a lot of overlap. And in some ways, they may not also have the kind of notice and visibility in the organization itself or in the system itself as you'll find when we look at growing organizations or fully mature kind of fundraising functions. So when we look at that, this person could come from any number of places. They may have somewhere between 3 to 7 to 10 years of experience total. More than that, they may begin to think about either moving to another organization, or that means that the system itself is beginning to mature and that they're going to typically need more than a different kind of profile. As Adam said, they're probably raising somewhere around $5 million or less. It will come from a variety of sources. And so what you don't have quite yet are strong functional kinds of drives around major giving or planned giving or events, but you find a blend of all of it, and what's needed at any particular time is what will emerge. I'm going to toss it back to Adam so that he can talk about the next stage of organizational growth.
Thanks, Marion. So moving along the continuum to what we're deeming a growing organization in terms of size, and again, thinking about it, as Marion said, being organized by function, so moving away from a very small and flexible staff who are kind of jack of all trades towards an organization that has individuals who are really focused in their specific areas of work. This is usually a staff of somewhere between 7 to 20 individuals, again, organized by function, but not yet quite completely major gift focused. We find this at large hospitals or multi-hospital systems, usually seeing somewhere between $7 and $15 million raised annually, with campaigns, moving in the 40 to 50 to 60 million type of area. And this is probably the profile where we see the widest range of organizations. It's easy to define those on the very sort of young or smaller end of things, and easy to see the behemoths out there who are doing lots of fundraising. So there's a wide range within this sort of sector that we're identifying here. Within this group, some of the metrics that we tend to encourage our clients to watch are results by program area. So as you're organized by function, making sure that you're measuring in that fashion. This is the time when a grateful patient program can begin to become very lucrative and productive and effective for a fundraising operation. So we'd like to look at those metrics as well in this size of organization. And then making sure that the people we've assigned to take on out the door or major gift responsibilities are doing just that. So it can be very easy in this size of organization to have people who are assigned to be out the door and calling on folks but get dragged back in to some of the activities of a younger organization.
Now, as Adam has indicated, what we're seeing now is a growing specialization. So the areas of corporate and foundation relations should exist. So should major giving as well as planned giving. There either may be a campaign, a smallish campaign in its history, but there may be an upcoming campaign that would be significantly larger. There are still events, but there is less on events now because there's a changing focus, and major giving is becoming the critical function for this particular type of system. You'll also see the emergence of advancement services now. So stewardship, donor relations, prospect research, and database management will become more and more critical for this kind of system. All those functions may not exist, but there is an awareness that they should exist, or they may be very nascent in their own growth and development. More than likely, you will start to look for people that have some healthcare in their background, or they may come from another type of organization that's healthcare related, such as volunteer health associations, or they may come from large human service organizations that touch on the area of healthcare. So the organization itself is beginning to be a little more specialized in what it needs from its development, operations, and functions. There is more notice within the hospital system in general of what development is and what it's supposed to do. There is probably an emerging board around this foundation, what is emerging to be a foundation now, that will be populated by people from the larger system as well as from the foundation itself. So this is probably the beginning of the maturing of healthcare systems in general. There is a need for more people who have specialization, and there is room for, ideally, professional development for people to grow in these functions and to really have somewhere to grow within the foundation itself. Versus earlier, there may be only 2 or 3 people, the person may need to leave in order to grow, whereas here, there should be a better record of service and tenure because there are more opportunities.
So as we move along the continuum, you'll hear in some of our comments that we're trending towards growth being better, and frankly, not everybody has the opportunity to grow into a larger staff. You have organizational and contextual constraints that prevent you from doing one thing or the other. Perhaps you're a small community hospital that is never going to be more than a 3 or 5 person shop, which is perfectly fine, of course. But as we think about how can we have the greatest impact in influencing the activities of the hospital or the health systems, this is sort of the direction that we're moving forward in. So thinking about high impact, and again, this is a structure, an organization that has become increasingly and consistently focused on securing major gifts. Usually has a staff size of 25 individuals or more, and again, that can range to very high levels. raising annually $25 million or more typically, and can be moving into campaigns with 9 or even 10-figure goals at the upper end of that. The types of organizations that we see, sometimes the nationally recognized names that we would all know, systems with 5 or more hospitals within it, or academic medical centers across the country. Certainly many of those fit this kind of profile. When we think about what kind of metrics to measure within this kind of organization, we look heavily at those major gifts or relationship management-based metrics. So things like portfolio yield. How much are your gift officers getting out of their portfolios? How many solicitations are they making on an annual basis? How many gifts are they raising on an annual basis? Everything related to a high-performing major gift team. Another thing that we start to see really grow to high levels within these kinds of organizations are affiliate groups. So whether that's service line affiliated groups who are raising money specifically for cancer or neurosciences or research, the management of those groups can begin to become a huge thing, and having the staff to manage those is significant. And then as you have such large groups of individuals implementing fundraising on behalf of the organization, ensuring that best practices are disseminated across the entire staffing structure is extremely important. We see this all the time, especially in large hospital systems where one group or another might be high performing for different reasons, and trying to ensure that your whole staff is adhering to practices that are effective and efficient and bringing in lots of dollars becomes increasingly important.
What we recognize from really large and mature systems is that it's complex. The foundation itself is complex, and in some ways may represent the mini complexity of the entire system itself. There's a foundation head, and that title could be the head of the foundation, vice president of development, executive director of the foundation. Those are kind of some of the typical titles that you might see there. More than likely, this is a person who is very senior in healthcare, has raised a lot of money for healthcare or healthcare-related organizations, probably managing overall 25 or more people. All of the functions within the foundation may not be development. There may be some administrative or financial positions that also now show up within this organization because of the complexity. Overall, they're raising $30 million or more, and often the foundation head, as you might expect, is also reporting to a board as well as into the head of the system itself. Within that kind of reporting structure also, there is probably a campaign in the works. There are now committees on the foundation, depending on what the needs are going forward. There is a very strong major gift presence. The head of the foundation may take the largest portfolio, but even the major gift officers themselves, the directors of development, the directors of institutional advancement, they are raising significant gifts depending on the needs of the system in general. What we see here is a fully worked development function. All the functions will exist. We talked about them earlier, the annual giving, the planned giving, corporate and foundation relations, the events, as well as a fully fledged advancement services organization that will be certainly as sophisticated as the direct calling officers. They just necessarily will not cultivate clients and cultivate donors. More than likely, the people who are in the foundation at this point will bring significant healthcare experience because of the maturity and the sophistication and the complexity of the system itself. But it's not unusual, again, to find people who will flesh that out, who may come from academic institutions, who may come from voluntary health organizations, and who may come from other types of charities. But the emphasis here is that this is a fully developed working system in and of itself, with all the complexities that exist within the systems.
I do have a question from the audience that I thought we could address. The question is, what differences do you see in the cost to raise a dollar between small, medium, and large foundations?
So what we see is that as you grow and move towards a more major gifts focused program, your cost to raise a dollar will go down and your return on investment will go up. And that's a result of, in every organization, human resource is going to be your largest expense. And so if we're using those human resources most effectively to go out and raise large gifts, and that is the most effective way to use them, we will see that the cost to raise a dollar go down and that ROI go up. The highest performing, highest impact organizations that we find often have cost to raise a dollar in the 5 to 15 cents range. And you should note that the AHP benchmark for this year, I believe, is right around 33 cents. So some of your smaller community hospital-based organizations will be up in that closer 30 cents on the dollar range, whereas your high-impact academic medical centers, large healthcare systems will be more in the 5, 10, 15 cents range.
Thank you.
So this is something we talk about very often, both Marion and the work that she does, conducting searches for our clients, and the work that I do in fundraising consulting for our clients is positioning the organization for hiring success. And it's pertinent to bringing in new staff, but also, of course, in raising money continually. Building a culture of philanthropy, what we define as a shared understanding about the importance of philanthropy to an organization or health system, is one of the keys in helping you to hire. If your leadership, your friends across the health system in any variety of positions, physicians as well, understand the impact and importance of giving within your organization, it makes it that much easier to make the argument for bringing in new people and bringing in the best people. In addition to that, we know that your volunteer boards can drive any number of agendas. It's always a delicate balance between micro and macro management of your organizations. But if you can convince your volunteers that bringing in the right people and growing your team is an important thing for continuing to impact the healthcare of their communities, they can become significant advocates for you in that process. In addition, we know that people like to go to winning teams, just like donors like to give to winning organizations. So the more that you can be successful, be out in the community, be visible as an organization that's doing great things in terms of fundraising and in general, the more that additional individuals are going to be willing to join you in your fundraising operations.
We find that organizations are have good success in their recruiting efforts when they have as much buy-in as possible within the recruiting process. It sometimes makes for a longer process, but the return can be enormous in terms of retaining good people, and it also having them almost have mentors when they walk in the door the first day because they're known to the organization. One of the questions that we got from the survey earlier was a person who had talked about how they made significant changes to the recruitment process, and they included all kinds of steps, and they had an interview process that included a phone screen as well as personal interviews, and they included a wide group of people, and they also did references. And in the end, the person still for them was not the fit that they were looking for. And what I want to say to the person is, you had a really great process, and sometimes you can do everything right and it still doesn't work. So I don't know that I would throw out the baby with the bathwater just yet, but I would monitor that process to see how it works for you going forward, because that's exactly what we would recommend people to do, and that's how we also think about it. So feel free to be in touch with more about this if you like, or give us a question while we're here, but I think that is a great process. But the other reality is there is a real shortage of really good development professionals. There are very, very good ones out there, but let's just look at some plain numbers. 1.3 million organizations, 450,000 development professionals. We have a shortage straight out of the gate. And so part of that is, and I'd like to say this, people that are working with their HR departments, is for the HR departments is a really struggle because you're looking for good people, but you also have to stay within the bounds of your own organizations, and there can be internal equity issues. And so there's a need to work very sensitively with HR because they're trying to respect the equity of the entire organization, but you're saying, yes, I need people for development, and so that bears this kind of compensation. But I think if there's a better collaboration around that, you may find better success in what you look for in that particular person. But I think that's how you position the organization when you think about how you'd like to hire. One of the questions that came up for us was, what do you do, though, if you feel like you have a small pool? And that small pool because you're looking for something that's very, very specialized, or you're limited geographically and you don't have a lot of people that may fit your parameters, which we also see. The flexibility there may come from looking in areas that are related to fundraising. I know that this is an ongoing debate. Do we have someone from sales, perhaps? I sometimes think that if a person is from sales, but their sales has been something that's intangible, they may be able to make the case for you nicely. I don't know if someone who's selling hard products can do it, but someone that's something that's soft and that person has to really see the benefit of it, maybe. There's also marketing professionals and there are also communications professionals, both of which can talk well. So if they can make the leap and have a real interest in the organization and in the mission, perhaps. We also think that being patient is it. There is the anxiety that we absolutely respect, that you need a person today because you feel that you are not accomplishing your goals without the person. But at the same time, you know, a bad hire can put you further back. So there is a bit of patience and a realistic expectation about how long it would take to bring this person to you. And then finally, respect your own process. If it's one that has worked for you, but maybe one time it didn't, again, you may need to adjust it, but it doesn't seem as if you would need to throw it out. We are finding more and more that people need to have time to get to know the organization. They are exploring as much as you are, and they need to be able to address the questions that will help them become more comfortable in the process. So be aware of that, we would advise, but at the same time, stay to a process that you think works for you. We want to talk a little bit about what it means to keep a person once they're there. Despite everything to the contrary, it is not money. When we survey on great places to work and employee retention, money is third. First is being a great organization to work for, and second is providing sufficient challenge for that person to grow in their position. You can work also, it's the person that they work for. The person can work for the most amazing organization on the planet, but if they have a stressful relationship with their manager, they may not stay. At the same time, if it may be a challenged organization, but yet they are really working for committed people who have this person's professional development in mind, the person may stay a very long time. So that's one thing. But providing professional development opportunities is certainly one that we always encourage people to think about, and looking for ways for them to expand their jobs. I was actually at a workshop last week with someone who said, honestly, if we look at just the structure of a major gift officer, they are just raising money over and over and over. But what makes it interesting is, can they take on additional projects that are fundraising related, but at the same time enhances the value of their jobs? Can they help to mentor other people so that they can learn their jobs better? They may not be in their position guides or their position descriptions or their job descriptions, but at the same time, they enhance the value of themselves and their organization.
I think that's such a good point, Marian, especially as it pertains to healthcare. Within the healthcare market, there's so often an opportunity for innovation within the organization. There are always new programs upcoming, new initiatives in terms of technology, new staff coming on that need to be supported, and that's a huge opportunity to grow from within. And I think that's one of the biggest keys to retention that we find. It's ensuring that even if it's not a change in title, even if it's not an increase in compensation, the ability to continue to pass on new leadership opportunities amongst your entire staff is huge for continuing to maintain and grow that staff. It was interesting in the survey that we conducted prior to the call that none of the organizations that responded had an average tenure of greater than 7 years. Now that's not, that's the norm these days, to have people going through it at 2 to 3 year clips. But it's a problem when we see organizations that are really fully developed and have moved into that high impact area. They've been able to develop a tenure, a significantly long tenure, especially for the management positions at the top that are guiding strategy and providing leadership and guidance for the rest of the staff.
I do have a question from the audience in terms of how to best hold fundraisers accountable for their work and for moving donors along that process.
So I would say that one of the things that we try and emphasize is clarity and regular evaluations that are based on clarity. So when someone begins either a job or a new responsibility within the organization, you need to be clear up front about what the expectations are around that and what they're expected to do on a regular basis, and then review that constantly. So it shouldn't just be an annual review, which, by the way, we see a lot of organizations not doing, but it should be a quarterly review so that there are no surprises along the way. And if you're evaluating people like that on a regular basis, so for example, if somebody is supposed to be making 15 out-the-door visits a month, and you get to the end of the first quarter and they haven't made 8, there's clearly a problem there and something that you can nip in the bud before it gets any worse. So that's what I would say is clarity up front and then actively managing throughout the process.
And then I had one other question from, and the question talks about the interviewing process. How do I attract the right people to apply in the first place?
There are a couple of things that I think may help. Many organizations find themselves in a position of passively recruiting. And you may not be able to be as active as, say, we are, because that's what we do. But you can do a couple of things. You can use your employees, for instance, to be PR for you. And you can also ask them who they might bring to the organization that you could think about. That's one way, I think, to bring people to attract. And the other is to really have a person, when they're there interviewing, sell them. Remember, you're selling them on the system. You're selling them to be there. So you can't assume that just because they've walked in the door and are interviewing with you that they're automatically going to take an offer if accepted. The minute that they step into the door, and even before, the way that they're welcomed can make a huge difference in what can attract them. Now, if we go back to how you might attract the person, it's where you, part of it could be where you think about advertising. While big vehicles such as AHP, which is a natural vehicle, may not have the return that you want, one of the things that's emerging are smaller vehicles that you could place advertising in listservs. So they may be very, very specialized. So they may be the development officers, healthcare development officers of the Northeast, for instance. Find them, because that is the audience that you may need or want to go after. And so you may already have people who are open to thinking about you as a place. The other is to become a great place to work. And that doesn't happen overnight, but there is a website. There is a place called The Great Place to Work, and it talks about how you really become a desired organization, or as what used to be called an employer of choice. So those are a couple of ways, I think, to think about that.
I would just add to that, Marion, what we touched on in creating an organization that's welcoming for new candidates. I can't emphasize enough having the buy-in of your executive leadership and your clinical leadership as well. If your CEO, president, their administrative cabinet or leadership team understand the importance of philanthropy to the organization, they're going to be keeping their eyes open for fundraising talent in the same way that they're keeping their eyes open for clinical and operational talent as well. And it's our responsibility as fundraisers to make sure that they're educated to the importance of it and that they see the impact of it on their bottom line.
Mm-hmm. There was a related question about attracting the right people to the position that we got from the survey, and my response to that was, when you were talking with people, please emphasize their accomplishments versus what they were hired to do. Because one of my favorite questions is, how is this system healthier and better as a result of your having been there? And that drives a person to talk about what they actually got done while they were there versus what they were hired to do in the beginning. If they did their job right, that job description should actually have changed because they enhanced it. So that's, I think, something that may be useful for you to think about.
So just some final thoughts. I think one thing that I want to emphasize is that to make the argument for hiring the right people the right way within your organization, the importance in doing that is demonstrating the impact that that addition or growth will create. And I think using this kind of illustration of a continuum of growth can help you do that. And as one of our questions sort of led to, the more that you can grow and the greater impact that you can have, the better your return on investment will be, the lower the cost to raise a dollar will be. And as we're moving into this era of the Accountable Care Act, the slimming of hospital and health system budgets, they're looking for as much help as possible. So if philanthropy can demonstrate that we can add to the bottom line in a significant and consistent way, it's something that will be embraced, and growing your team is a way to do that.
So we either talk too fast or we don't have enough slides, but that's okay because we have questions, again, that came from the survey, and one person did ask that we leave enough time so that we could address questions that have come up for people. So we're going to see how many of these that we can address in the next 15 or 20 minutes. The first one was competition within city. We're located in a town that is booming from oil, and many employers need workers, so we lose people because of being attracted elsewhere for more money. Now, I would imagine that this might be an issue for a younger system than for a more mature one, simply because in a younger system, you haven't quite gelled in terms of what you need in terms of competencies. It may be, and you may not like this answer, it may be that you just understand that you are an organization that people will join and be with you for 2 or 3 years, and then they move on. And so the trick there is to make sure that you optimize the experience that you need from the person for the time that they're going to be there, because that may be the reality. But if it's a more mature health system, you may not be competing as much as you think, because if a person really is a healthcare professional, they would still gravitate to you, ideally. The truth may lie somewhere in between those two, but I think that's...
I would also add to that, Marion, your point earlier about patience as a virtue. I think in a situation where there's heavy competition or you're having trouble attracting the right candidate, I would veer towards waiting to find the right candidate, taking the time to do that as opposed to just filling the spot right now. I know there are all kinds of organizational pressures on a day-to-day basis that move you towards wanting to fill that right away, but think about creative ways that you can fill the operational need today while really hiring the right person for the future, whether that's somebody temporarily who can fill in the holes while you search for somebody who's really a specialist in the area that you need.
Interestingly, it may turn out that you don't need the person as much as you thought you did, or that you could restructure the position so that parts of it go to other people. It may not be the long-term solution, but as Adam said, it allows you to have the patience that you need and allows the work to also get done. So we have another question that talks about, in terms of retention, forcing too many hats into one position. We so discourage this. If you are a direct calling officer, for instance, and you find that there are elements of your job that now have to do with donor relations, you'll either do half of those jobs or you'll do them well. Be assertive about trying to create the position guide that does work for you so that this person can be good at their job.
I would add to that, going back to my point earlier, that not every fundraising organization or foundation is going to grow into one that is major gifts focused. Sometimes your location, your regionality, your service base just precludes you from doing something like that. So be honest about what your capability is within your service area, and then fit positions to that capability. And be honest with your administration as well about what you're capable of raising on an ongoing basis. I find that hospital CEOs and presidents are most happy when they can understand exactly what they can expect from their foundation on an annual basis, as opposed to sort of wishing for the future and trying to dream about something that you can't fulfill because of contextual constraints.
Another question that we had was about finding truly qualified staff in the first place and people who are really willing and able to make donor relationships a priority. This is another example of where through the interview process and ideally the referencing, if you can ask directed questions through your referencing of what a person has really accomplished and done, and have them tell you the story. How did this gift happen? How did you steward this? Who was involved in this relationship? What were the challenges of it? How long did it take? But you need to know a few of those stories and to recognize if there are kinks along the way and how that cultivation happened, where did it happen, and how did you recover from that? Because that's sometimes a better indicator of a stronger professional because they've been bumped around a bit. That's where tools such as behavioral-based interviewing can help. Because it talks about how you addressed an issue versus how would you. So those can often be helpful.
We've worked with a client who has developed an interviewing process through which they brought some real rigidity to the qualifications that any new fundraiser for their organization will bring. And they found that rigidity to be successful in bringing in candidates who are doing what they need to do. Now, that's not going to work for every organization, but I think to find those thresholds that are important for you and use, as Marion notes, having them talk about their experience, filling those qualifications can be very helpful in determining who the right candidate for you is.
Okay, great guys. Thank you for answering all those questions. I know we received quite a few of them. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send us an email, and we'll be able to get to you with those questions and answers for you. But thank you to Adam and Marion and for everyone who joined us today. I want to let you know about an upcoming webinar that we're excited to present. This is the Giving USA National Webinar, and this is set for Tuesday, June 18th from 12:30 p.m. Sorry, to 1:30 p.m. Central Time. And you can register at campbellcompany.com. That webinar is free. We're excited to have Judy Belk from Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, John Lippincott from CASE, and Mark Stewart from the Zoological Society of San Diego join us for that. So make sure that you go onto our website and register for that. Everything else, have a great spring, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Yay.
Can we talk now?
Mm-hmm.